Letitia Wallace is raising awareness about how recent federal legislation could strain Illinois' finances. The founder of Light Strategies spoke at a policy briefing early Wednesday, highlighting a growing disconnect between what Washington, D.C. is doing and what Illinois communities actually need. She stressed that state leaders must step up to support local businesses, organizations, and families, especially as federal policies like President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill add pressure.
Some of the policy proposals around Medicaid, for example, seem to be very specific to quote-unquote blue states. And that will have an impact on millions and millions of lives in our country.